what's the percentage of Americans who live at or below the poverty level?
I don't know the percentage.
Okay, it's around 11%. Your Census Bureau says it's 11% who live at or below the poverty level. That's a lie. Why don't you just use satellite internet service? Why don't you just use Global Star or Starlink? You said the cost is $4,000 per person in Louisiana. For $600, you can buy a Starlink terminal and save a bunch of money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Mr. Secretary, the Census Bureau is under your jurisdiction, is it not?
Yes, it is.
And the Census Bureau is in charge of defining what it means to be poor or in poverty in America. Is that correct?
I think it does economic analysis for America.
But it also defines poverty level, does it not?
I don't know if it's the defining
Well, you need
Bureau.
to look, because it does.
Okay.
If you know, this isn't a quiz, if you know, what's the percentage of Americans who live at or below the poverty level?
I don't know the percentage.
Okay, it's around 11%. It's been constant. Now, when the Census Bureau defines poverty, they do it by income. You're aware of that. When the Census Bureau defines poverty using income, they only count income that the individual earns or cash income that the individual gets from the federal government. Is that correct?
Well, it includes all sources of their income. I mean, that is the purpose.
Yeah, their income and cash income from the federal government. Is that correct?
Oh, meaning does it include income that they receive from the federal government?
Yeah, cash.
I think so.
Yeah. So if a person makes $11,000 a year, that's considered toward poverty level. But if the person gets a cash payment, let's say in the form of SSI or TANF, that counts too. Is that right?
I'm not certain.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Are you aware that your agency doesn't count non-cash payments from the federal government defining poverty?
I am not.
Are you aware that your agency doesn't count refundable earned income tax credits, or food stamps, or housing subsidies, or utility bill subsidies, or Medicaid, or free school meals? They don't count that. They call it a non-cash payment, and it doesn't count. You aware of that?
It sounds to me that you and I are going to spend some time together and we're going to change it, but I did not know that, and it sounds like something that we should add.
And the purpose of my questioning is not to punish people who need help. The American people are the most generous people in the world. That's why we spend $1.4 trillion a year helping people that other countries would allow to die in a ditch. But your Census Bureau says it's 11% who live at or below the poverty level. That's a lie. It's 1%. If you count as any person with a brain above a single-cell organism would, cash and non-cash payments, they're above the poverty level. And we ought to be honest with the American people and thank them for getting the poverty level down to 1% instead of giving them a curb stomping and calling them selfish. Let me give you a real life example here. Let's suppose you've got a mom and two kids. According to your Census Bureau, the poverty level for her is $27,000. She makes $11,000 a year, let's say. So she's below the poverty level. But she also qualifies for $3,400 in refundable tax credits based on her $11,000 salary, $9,200 in food stamps, that's for her and her two children, $9,500 in housing subsidies, $900 in utility bill subsidies, $16,000 in Medicaid, $3,100 a year in free school lunches, and $6,600 a year in TANF. That's $64,100 a year, tax-free. Is she living in poverty?
Doesn't sound like it.
No, but your Census Bureau counts her as being poor. I'm not saying take away her benefits. I'm saying give the American people a little credit. And I really think you need to change the definition to a definition that looks like somebody designed the damn thing on purpose. Final question, I'm going to hurry, Mr. Chairman. Why don't you just use satellite internet service? Why don't you just use Global Star or Starlink? You said the cost is $4,000 per person in Louisiana. For $600, you can buy a Starlink terminal. Why don't you just do that? And do it across America and save a bunch of money.
The states were responsible for determining the best outcome, and sometimes fiber in a dense location can be economically better. Sometimes satellite does not work best on geography.
It can't be cheaper. That's impossible. It can't be cheaper.
Math is, each of the states did their best. We worked it out with them, and we moved on.
I just don't understand. You can buy, I'm not saying do Musk. There are others that just throw it out for bid. But $600 for a terminal versus $4,000 for fiber optic? This is taxpayer money. I'm done. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Madam Chairman. I should have known it's you, Shelley. You're much nicer than Jerry. He would have cut me off.
Yeah, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. In your opening statement, you said the states chose to do it, meaning the BEAD program, the best way for their states. In 2023, NTIA allocated $196.5 million in BEAD funding to the state of New Hampshire based on a 5-year plan that were approved and submitted in 2024. And the state planned to develop broadband infrastructure by prioritizing fiber optic cables and hybrid fiber coaxial technologies. And I appreciate Senator Kennedy's question about satellite transmission, because in some places it does make sense, and as you pointed that out in your opening statement. But the reality is there are a lot of places where it doesn't make sense, because in states like New Hampshire, satellites are unreliable in severe weather. They have a shorter lifespan, and they require more maintenance than fiber optic cables. So as you pointed out also, in a lot of places, it's actually better long-term to use those fiber optic cables. And one of the reasons that New Hampshire submitted a new plan was because on June 6th, your office said they had to come up with a low-cost, technology-neutral approach that's required by the new guidelines. But that approach was not what the state had determined was the best way to connect. And now we see that SpaceX in June 2026, who was in negotiations with New Hampshire, has sent a letter to states with a set of demands that would ensure Starlink receives federal grant money even when residents don't purchase Starlink broadband service. The demands would also guarantee that SpaceX gets paid even if it doesn't reserve large portions of Starlink network capacity for homes in the areas that are supposed to receive BEAD-funded internet service. So my question, Mr. Secretary, is, given that and given concerns that we're seeing in the state of New Hampshire, are states going to be able to renegotiate with ISPs on the requirements of the program if they're dealing with a company like SpaceX that is not agreeing to what has been determined to be the requirements of their grants?
Thank you. New Hampshire we agreed with New Hampshire in November of 2025. So they were one of the first and one of the fastest to go for the new guidelines, and they did an excellent job. 67% is fiber, because they determined that was the best outcome. 21.5% was satellite, and then, you know, the fixed wireless was about 11%. So they used a technology-neutral approach. They saved a lot of money, and they've done your broadband office did a great job. So I just
there's no doubt about that, but the percentages are not totally accurate, because in a state like New Hampshire, where we have a lot of small communities and rural populations, the percentages don't accurately reflect the households we need to reach if we're going to ensure 100% access to broadband service. And that's the issue that I'm raising with you, because right now we have a plan that has been revised, and as you point out, it has been approved. But the reality is over 1,000 households, or 1,000 locations, it's about 1,106, I think, depend on accurate, adequate connections to Starlink. And right now, we're engaged in a debate over whether Starlink is actually going to provide that service that we're trying to contract for. So what I want to know is, if we have an ISP that is not willing to abide by the terms of the agreement, can states go out and get a new ISP that's actually going to provide by the terms of the agreement?
It is my understanding that SpaceX, as you correctly say, sent you a rider to modify the terms.
They sent a number of states.
And they sent a number of states. That rider is outside of our guidelines, is outside the statute, and it is rejected by us. There will be no rider. And if SpaceX does not want to live without the rider, then you will definitely go find an alternative means of execution so you can deliver broadband to each and every one of the people in your state as you are entitled to and as we will deliver. So we are on the same side.
Thank you. I appreciate that.